Hi, everybody. Welcome to your last week of substantive study. This is our last week of homework, and you already know that the chart is over. And this week, your homework is going to look a little different. We are going to cover John 18, 19, 20, and 21, but don't panic, not line by line and verse by verse like we have been, but rather we're only going to study the last words that Jesus spoke during this time. And these chapters are his arrest, his trial, the crucifixion, the resurrection, and some of the things he spoke to the disciples after his resurrection. So it is a powerful way to close out this study. And you can see, just the words that he spoke during these moments are so few, but so powerful. So that is what you're going to see in your homework today. Let's talk about a couple of highlights are one in chapter 18 is the arrest and some of the trial. And boy, I can't wait for you to see this one section where this band of soldiers and Jewish leaders are coming to the garden to get him with Judas. And he asks them, he goes right up to them, our Jesus, right? He is not afraid. He goes right up to them and says, "Who are you looking for?" And they say, "Jesus the Nazarene." And he says, "I am he." And then the next line says, "And they fell over to the ground," or they fell back to the ground. And then they got up and he asked them again, "Who do you seek?" And they said it again, "Jesus the Nazarene." But as I studied this passage and these passages, I thought, well, surely this must just be kind of a phrase or a thing people say, like a saying. Surely it can't mean they literally fell to the ground. But each translation I found, and each way we looked it up, either in the Greek or the Hebrew, the original translations literally mean they fell back and fell to the ground. So when Jesus said, "Who are you looking for?" And they said, "Jesus the Nazarene." And then he says, "I am he." This whole group of men, soldiers, literally fall to the ground. They are bowled over by the power of God. They're bowled over by the simple words of Jesus. And I would ask you, when's the last time that you got bowled over? Just literally could have knocked you over with a feather, right? That's the kind of phrase I thought they were giving us, but it's not. It literally means they fell backward and fell to the ground. So I can't wait for you to kind of see that in your homework and for you to ponder that a little bit about the power of Jesus and just what he sacrificed to come here for us and to die for us is amazing. I can't wait to see his glory, right, in heaven and see him in his full power and his full glory. You will see throughout the next few chapters that he speaks very few words during his trial, but again, they are pointed, just as Jesus is often doing. He makes very pointed statements to those who are challenging him. And you will get a chance to study those words and to write them down in your homework this week. I don't want you to miss a couple of things. I don't want you to miss the fact that Jesus first appeared after his resurrection to a woman. So here's the scene. Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb the next morning after his death, and she sees the tomb is open and there's no body. She goes running back to the guys, and she gets Peter and John. And John can't resist writing to us that he and Peter raced, to the tomb, and that he got there first, right? Men and their competition. I have 3 older brothers, so I know about this need to compete, and I just think it's cute that John felt the need to tell us that he and Peter raced to the tomb and he got there first. But they don't see anything but the linens, the wrappings that would have been around Jesus' body, and they see the wrappings that would have been around his head in another place in the tomb. And then John says he believed at that point, but doesn't say what he believed. And then they went back to their homes, their own homes. And Mary's just standing there, she's just weeping. And then finally, Jesus appears. Now let me ask you this. Why didn't he appear to John and Peter? This is the rock of his church and presumably his best friend. Why did he wait until they were gone and appear first to Mary Magdalene? Why? I think it's because, this is just my personal opinion, I think it's because he wanted us women, his daughters, to know that we hold a special, honored, precious place in his kingdom. The first person he told to spread the good news was a woman, us. And I think that is a treasure that each woman should tuck up in her heart and place her value there. What if we women could place our value, our self-esteem, our confidence right there, that Jesus Christ chose first a woman to spread the good news and to tell others that he was alive. I love it. So don't miss that. Another sweet part in your homework is right before Jesus dies, he cares for women. And so I want you to see in the moment of his darkest hour, right before his death, he takes care of Mary, his mother. And yet also at one of his greatest moments of glory, when his resurrection becomes known, it's to a woman, to care for her because she's weeping, to Mary Magdalene. And so both our God, Jesus, in his darkest hour and in one of his most glorious hours, cared for women. So there he is, dying on the cross in his darkest hour, and he looks down and he sees his mom, Mary, at the cross with John, the disciple whom Jesus loved. And he takes a moment and he says, "Mother, from now on, John is your son. And John, from now on, please, Mary is your mom." And it says that from then on, John took Mary into his household. And I love that Jesus took a moment and cared for his mom and cared for her heart. He knew how hard she would grieve his loss and the pain that she would be in. And so she placed John and them together purposefully, intentionally. And then we've already talked about his glorious hour where he waited. I think he kind of hung back while Peter and John were there and saved this special moment of first showing himself to Mary Magdalene, who was weeping at his loss. And so at his greatest hour and his darkest hour, Jesus cared for two women who are important in his life. It's a great way to close up this study. And then at the very end of the study, we get one more lesson that I don't want you to miss. And this is the lesson about Peter, right? So remember that Jesus predicted at the beginning of our study in week 1 that Peter would deny him 3 times before the rooster crows. And then, of course, you will see in these chapters, 18, 19, 20, that it comes true. Peter denies our Lord 3 times and the rooster crows. But in one of his final appearances to the disciples is on the beach and fishing, and that's a great story and you're going to love it. So dig into that last day of homework. But Jesus is there sitting on the beach with his disciples once again, eating a meal. And he restores Peter. He gives Peter 3 chances to say, "I love you." So Jesus says to Peter, "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says, "Yes, Lord, I love you." Jesus asks it again. "Peter, do you love me?" And Peter says it again. And he asks him a 3rd time. Now there's all kinds of debate about why, Jesus was doing this 3 times. And for me, here's the way that it strikes me. That no matter how many times I mess up, Jesus is going to be right there to ask me, "Kim, do you love me?" And if my answer is yes, then I am forgiven. And so I would put that on your heart this week as you do your homework is please don't think that you've just messed up one too many times, that the Lord can't look at you and say your name and ask, do you love me? And you can say yes, and your relationship can be right back together again. And I want you to see the restoration of Peter. The very last lines in our study are very important also for us women, because we tend to compare ourselves to others. Come on, you know that we do this, right? We compare ourselves to others. And so Jesus just had this moment where he restores Peter to as a leader in the group, right? He asks him these 3 times, do you love me? And then he says, come on, follow me. And so now Peter is getting separated from the group to go on a private walk with Jesus. And he can't resist turning around and looking at John. Picture that, right? Jesus says, come with me. And you start walking. And instead of keeping his eye on Jesus, Peter turns around and says, hey, why is John following us, right? In the text, he says, what about him? And he means John behind him, following him. John got up and started following them. Peter, I suspect, didn't care for that. But he says to Jesus, what about him? And I want you to write down what he said, because if we can grasp this, our lives will be filled with much more freedom. Here's what Jesus said. Peter says, what about him? And Jesus said, what is that to you? And he mentions, if I want him to remain, what is that to you? You follow me. And isn't that the heart of it? I just picture, for those of you who have kids or maybe grandkids or nieces and nephews or just cousins even little, have you ever seen a parent take their little chin and say, hey, and get down on their level and grab their little chin and say, listen to me? I feel like Jesus did that to Peter. Peter says, what about John? And Jesus says, what's it to you? You follow me. And if we can grasp that and we can keep our eyes on Jesus and not look around at everybody else and not look around at what she's doing or how much she prays or how much she studies her Bible or how she, doesn't like to study her Bible and, whatever. Her kids, her family, why are we looking around? Jesus says, what is that to you? Don't worry about any of that. You follow me. And that's where our study is going to end. And it is awesome, at least the content. Then we'll have 1 week of review. But this is our last video with content. And I will do one more video for you guys here next week that talks about how I'd love for you to do a review week and in the homework. So that's time's up. Thanks. I'll see you next week.